To say hi, everyone. Partners for Progressive Israel is proud to be sharing My Tree as a pre-symposium feature, along with this interview and Q&A with the film's director, Jason Sherman, and the historian, Paul Sham. I welcome you, all of you who have signed up for the Israel-Palestine Symposium 2022, as well as those of you who registered just to see the film and attend this particular event. My name is Ben Sharif. I'm a proud board member of Partners for Progressive Israel. And before I introduce the panelists, I want to say a brief note about Partners. Partners for Progressive Israel is an American not-for-profit that seeks to bring voices from Israel and Palestine to an American and international audience, providing an important link between key government, NGO, and grassroots leaders from the Middle East to deepen our understanding of the complexities facing the region. Over 30 years ago, my late grandfather, Harold Shapiro, took the initial group to Israel-Palestine to have a firsthand political and societal experience unlike any other, and the symposium has continued year after year. While it's difficult for us right now to organize in-person visits since the outbreak of the pandemic, we're still continuing the tradition virtually. Today is sort of a prologue for this year's journey, and I believe My Tree is the perfect starting place for us. If you haven't signed up for the symposium, which is this year is titled The Struggle for Human Rights, From Declaration to Occupation, then I encourage you to check it out. And you can find details on our website at progressiveisrael.org, and we'll add a link into the chat. The symposium sessions begin this Sunday, October 23rd, and we hope that you will leave this webinar with knowledge that will support you in advocating for Partners' mission of a durable and just peace between Israel and its neighbors, as well as the ensuring of civil rights, equality, and societal justice for all inhabitants of the region. So let me briefly explain the format for this session. As moderator, I'll pose some initial questions to our panelists, and you all can keep your questions in mind. And following the initial conversation, you'll have the opportunity to ask them directly. I invite you to, once we get to this portion of the session, you can click on the reactions button towards the bottom of your screen and press the raise hand button to virtually raise your hand, or if you want to physically raise your hand, I will try to keep an eye on your different boxes. And if you'd rather me read your question out loud, you can type it in the chat, and I'm more than happy to read it for you. Throughout the duration of this Q&A, when you're not asking a question, I do ask that you please keep your sound on mute to avoid any cross communication or disturbances. So now let me begin by introducing today's panelists. First, Jason Sherman is a celebrated playwright and screenwriter with a multi-award winning body of work for the stage and screen. His feature documentary, My Tree, which is about his search for the tree that was planted in his name in Israel, premiered at the 2021 Hot Docs Festival before going on to play at festivals across Canada. It won the 2022 Canadian Screen Award for Best Editing in a Feature Documentary and was nominated for the Best Documentary Feature. Jason also wrote the docudrama We Were Children, about Canada's residential school systems, as well as numerous TV series. Among his internationally produced plays are Reading Hebron, The League of Nathans, It's All True, and Three in the Back, It's All True, and Three in the Back, Two in the Head, which won the Governor's General's Award for Drama. He also created and wrote a number of radio dramas for the CBC, including two long-running series, National Affairs and Afghanada. Paul Sham is the director of the Gildenhorn Institute for Israel Studies at the University of Maryland and a professor of Israel Studies. His primary interest is in the history and current politics of Israel and of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For the last few years, he has focused on the historical narratives of the two sides, co-editing 2 books and publishing a number of articles. He also co-authored the US IP Special Report on Hamas in 2009. And from 1996 to 2002, he lived in Jerusalem and coordinated Israeli, Palestinian, and Israeli-Jordanian joint research projects at the Truman Institute for the Advancement of Peace at the Hebrew University. Paul is also the current president of Partners for Progressive Israel. So first now, I'd like to start by asking Jason a couple questions, and then we'll come to Paul. So Jason, thank you again for being here today to discuss your wonderful film with us. First, I'd like
Thank
to
you.
ask.
And sorry, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to
Please.
say hi and thanks, partners, for including the film in the conference, and to everyone who's taking part today.
Cool. Yeah. We're so happy to have you here for this conversation. I'd first like to ask you about how this idea of turning such a personal journey into a documentary came about for you.
It started with a thought that came to me while I was in Israel. And I think it was my first trip, which I took about 10 or 12 years ago. I was invited to Israel to take part in a theater festival, actually to watch a bunch of plays in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and Haifa. And I spent a lot of time on buses and in dark rooms. And so now that I think of it, I think that it was the second trip that I took, because that first one was just sort of like a taste. And because I didn't see very much of the actual country, I decided to go back and see it for myself on my own agenda. And having had a long-standing interest in writing about Israel and Israel-Palestine and the occupation and the relationship between diasporic Jews and Israel, et cetera, I thought, okay, now's the time for me to go and see the place for myself. And because you mentioned in my bio a couple of plays that I'd written on those issues, one of which was Reading Hebron, about the Hebron massacre. And so I wanted to go, and so the plays were really about, again, about the relationship between the diaspora and Israel, Palestine. So now I went to see it for myself. And it was when I was on that trip and going hither and yon, and including for the first time ever 2 places like Hebron, and Tel Aviv, that I had this kind of dual thought all the time while being there, which was, yes, I'm feeling this deep connection here, understandably, because when you grow up in a place like Toronto, in the Jewish community, Israel is a large part of your identity, and so it's, for me, it's akin to going to London for the first time, having read Dickens and all the other great English authors that you read in school, and then suddenly you're walking on the same streets that they're writing about, and so it was the same thing. But on my other shoulder was someone saying, how are you actually connected here? And you were manipulated all those years, and it was, you were being, brought into a way of thinking and so on. So I had this sort of tug of war going on in my head. And as part of that, I started to think about what my real connection was to, like, actual tangible connection. And as lighthearted as it might seem to say, it was the tree that came into my head. Literally the only thing that tied me to Israel was the tree, because I remembered in that moment that I had a tree planted there. And so I thought, what if I go and try to find the tree? What is it going to tell me about the place, my relationship to it, in ways that I'd never explored before in all my other writing about Israel? And I thought, I'll do it as I'll make a record of it. So I'll do it as a documentary. And that's where it started.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Quite a journey.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
As a filmmaker, I know that documentaries in particular take a long time to develop and see through.
Yes, especially when they're being solely funded by arts councils.
Yeah.
And friends and family.
Yeah. But I think that the personal journey is certainly worthwhile. And as a diaspora Jew myself, I often find myself asking these questions about what our role is in the complexities of the situation, especially when you hear about all the human rights violations being committed in the name of Jewish people. And so you allude to this a bit in the film, but I wanted to ask you directly how your relationship with your own religious identity and connection to the state changed after making the film, if at all.
I don't know that it's changed. I'm not, I mean, I guess, depending on how we're defining or using the word religious, you know, I am one of those diasporic Jews who saw, you know, his bar mitzvah as a chance to get out of going to synagogue. Because then I was given the opportunity to decide for myself whether I wanted to go or not. So that may tell you a little bit about my commitment to the religious aspects. I'm a secular. I'm a, you know, full on, you know, secular Jew. I like the cultural aspects of it, the religious aspects of it, not so much. You know, the, you know, saying Kaddish, you know, for my parents is a very moving experience until, you know, if you sit back and read the words, which are, you know, extolling God and have nothing to do with the person you're speaking these moving words over. So I think really what changed in the making of the film was my recognition that for all that I thought I knew about the place, I had a lot more to learn, and specifically about the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, Keren Kayemet LeYisrael, as it's known in Israel, and the role that it has played, continues to play, apparently will continue to play in Israel and Palestine, and because I was brought into their processes of control, the role that I had unwittingly played in having a tree planted there to cover up, be part of a cover up. So that is kind of what I discovered in the making of the film. And that's, you know, what's captured on film. And, you know, I'll just say that, you know, as much as I can read about it, have conversations about it, it was only being there and on the very spot, as you see in the film, that although in a sense it's random, the tree that I choose, because I don't, you know, there wasn't a sign on it saying this is my tree, but clearly that was the place where my tree would have been planted, that it was a very moving experience. And, you know, together with meeting someone who had been born there and raised there and expected to live much of his life there, and his reflections on his displacement and the destruction of his home. Yeah, those were the things that surprised me the most.
That's amazing. I think that we can all take a lesson from your book in that it's really, it takes active learning and critical thinking about these issues to really dive deep and reveal how complicit we often are, just unconsciously, and it takes that work to really understand. And I think to really fully encompass our Jewish obligation of being, you know, of thinking of social justice and whatnot. I think it's such an important journey for everyone to take. My next question for you is about the interview with Harris D. Gulko and why you felt that was important to include in this piece. It seems to me it stood out as a very different perspective than many of the other interviews that you featured, and sometimes at times ignorant of certain facts. But why did you feel that interview was particularly important?
Well, so Harris D. Gulko was the long-standing executive director of Jewish National Fund of Canada. And in that role, he was responsible for coming up with both the idea for Canada Park and raising funds for it, as he very gleefully describes and proudly describes in the course of the interview. I had been, as you know from the film, although I might have hit this harder, I don't know, but I think it's pretty clear from the film that I took great pains to include the Jewish National Fund in the film. It's their forest, and I wanted anyone, preferably someone in a position of authority, along with a forester, to walk me through Canada Park, just as someone from an activist organization does, and explains to me the existence of the villages. But I wanted them on film to tell me about their parks and their work from their point of view. I think I'm not a strict adherent to the idea of balance in a documentary. I am telling a story, but at the same time, and balance is such it's in the mind's eye, that for some people, even if I had included the Jewish National, someone from the JNF currently, if they had consented to participate in the film, it still wouldn't have been seen as balanced. From my experience in theater, as soon as, when you're writing about these issues, as soon as you have the Palestinian point of view expressed, you're presenting an imbalanced point of view. So, that's neither here nor there. However, I did think it was important to not just have me, as I end up having to do early in the film, do a kind of potted history of the JNF with, select, historical images and so on. I wanted someone from the JNF right now to tell me about all of the things they do. They refused over and over, including right here in my own town, Toronto, after agreeing to participate in the film and then not liking what this person thought the direction of the film was going of the interview was going to take, canceling it right there and then. Anyway, so ultimately I tracked down Harris Gulko because he, in a way, even if I had managed to get someone from the JNF to agree to be in a film, in a way, Harris Gulko is the more relevant voice, the more relevant spokesperson for the JNF, because he's the guy that built the forest, not with his own hands, but he raised the money, quite a lot of money. And over the years, kept the trees coming. And I think it's important to understand the mindset of the people that put up the forest. To accept his word, he didn't know about the villages. But at the same time, he had just been told that the area had been taken. So I'm not sure how you square those two things, but he certainly seems to be at peace with the idea that we had just suddenly been given this land, this barren land, and now we'd like to make sure that no one else gets to occupy it other than us. So put up a forest. That's why I felt it was very important to have that voice in the film.
Absolutely, and I am glad you included it, and also as well as your numerous, your numerous attempts at trying to get cooperation with the JNF. I think their unwillingness to cooperate is just as telling.
Yeah, and so, it's odd because, sorry, I know you want to move on, but the I had, as part of my research, I'd read, there's not a shelf full of books, but about the JNF, but there were enough to take up a lot of time reading and contacting the authors and arranging for interviews, which unfortunately fell through for very different reasons. But those authors didn't have any trouble getting access to JNF archives, interviews with JNF representatives. Now, interestingly, those books were from at least a decade ago. So something has happened in the intervening years to make them cautious about allowing someone like me to come and interview them for the record.
Sure. So thank you, Jason. At this point, I want to turn it over to Paul for his historical and personal perspective about Canada Park, actually.
I'd like to spend a minute actually on my own journey, because I'm also a diaspora Jew. I grew up with a connection to Israel that I really didn't start exploring until I was almost 38 years old. And what fascinated me almost from the beginning is the clash of narratives that, in the larger sense that I think Jason saw, that focus on the dispossession, the Nakba of 1948. So I've focused my own professional work on Israeli and Palestinian narratives, as well as being active in peace movements. But I consider myself a supporter of Israel, even though obviously people with a right-wing perspective may not see it that way. And just one more sentence on this. Jason is absolutely right that in the last 10 or so years, attitudes have hardened on both sides, and instead of encouraging inquiry, the institutions like JNF are circling the wagons in many ways. So on the film, I was impressed by both how you hit the important historical aspects very well, and that you included views, different views, including the clueless interview with Harris Gallico, who, as I understood it, he could not accept that what he had devoted his life to was in some ways a lie. And he also mixed up what happened in 48 in the Nakba as a whole, when perhaps 600 villages, I've heard different estimates, between 400 and 600 were essentially destroyed and largely grown over either deliberately by JNF or just allowed to vegetate after being physically destroyed. One point I'd like to make that was made in the film about the three villages, it may have seemed like an excuse that was over the road to Tel Aviv. The fact is, Israel didn't know in the wake of the Six-Day War what might happen to the West Bank. It was sort of assumed it would go back to someone, that it wouldn't remain in Israeli hands. And so Israel decided that before any decisions were made about the West Bank, it would create facts on the ground and make sure that those three villages wouldn't be returned, that there wouldn't be people there because of its very strategic location. Finally, when I lived in Israel in 1996 to 2002, my wife, who's an archaeologist, was involved with Zochrot, the memory institution that was discussed in the film. And she wrote at least one article, and we actually went down, she and I and our then 3 or 4-year-old daughter, with a group of Palestinians and Israelis to clean the cemetery at Imwas. And so we were there, we heard about it. Its importance in the New Testament, which is where Jesus was after his rising, after supposedly met with 2 people and had a conversation. So it is a name known in the Christian world. And also this in 67, after the Six-Day War, unlike in 48, Israel did not generally destroy villages. There were these 3. I'm not excusing it. I'm just saying that most of the destruction that's remembered in the Nakba happened in 1948, and the situation was very different in 67. What Israel got after 67 was the occupation. The great victory turned into a millstone around Israel's neck that's still there.
Thank you, Paul. That's very interesting history, and I'm sure that was a profound experience to be there in person to clean up the cemetery and to have a direct contact there and learn on the ground. At this time, I'd like to open the Q&A up to audience members. If anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, again, by using the function in by clicking the reactions button and pressing raise hand, or if you want to just actually physically raise your hand, we can unmute you and invite you to speak. Ayala.
Hi, thank you very much, Jason, for the movie. I really appreciate it. And I have a question for you about the issue of complicity and implications. So, and that's, I'm talking not about Israelis, I shift the focus to American Jews, Canada, and the United States. It's very clear that implicating, lying all the time was an implication and making them partners in a secret that they had no idea they were part of. But my question is about when do you become complicit? Because I see it not as a deliberate originally from your film, as implicating Jews, basically, not telling them the truth, hiding facts from them. Now that your film is out and probably people can find the facts and the truth, what do you think is going on in the Jewish diaspora that they take the step for being implicated to being consciously complicit?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. I think, if I understand you correctly, that you go from, I think complicity kicks in when you know the facts and then either fail to act upon them or deny them outright, and remain silent about what is clearly, in the case of Canada Park and the events that led to it, wrong and more than wrong. It's a war crime by international definition. So if you know what took place and keep it to yourself, as John Goddard explained to me in a moment that I wish I had in the film, but unfortunately couldn't put in, which is that he was there one time on a cheroot passing Canada Park. He overheard a conversation between a married couple behind him that went something like this. The husband said, "Oh, honey, this Canada Park. I think we've donated trees to Canada Park." And his wife said, "Shh, don't talk about that." So that's complicity. But then there's the outright denialism and rationalizing the actions, which I think is what we see from Harris Galko, which is another reason I think it's important that we have a voice like that in the film. I have been asked, do I wish I had been more pointed in my conversation with him, and, for example, challenged him on what he had to say about Arabs who fled in 48, which he does indeed conflate with 67, and even the issue, the myth of the fleeing Arabs from 48 and all that is questionable. But I wanted to I wanted to just hear his beliefs. But the other thing is that I thought about this, and if I had been more pointed, for example, I think he simply retreats to the position of we were there first, which he already stated. So in a way, so there are a lot of people like him who take the position that not only were we there first, but it was given to us by God. So those people will never see themselves as complicit, but of course, that attitude leads you to do things like destroy, take and destroy villages that have been standing there for thousands of years, and removing its occupants, and then trying to deny the fact that they were there to begin with, and then continuing to deny the fact that they were there to begin with, or that they are who they say they are, and so on. So that's the that's the dividing line for me, and why it was so important, just from a kind of personal point of view, for me to find out from John Goddard, in this case, the journalist, if what Canadians knew, and by extension Americans and the entire diaspora knew about those villages in that time. And of course, they knew nothing. So you can also say, if you want to be a bit harder line about it all, well, you should go and find out. You shouldn't just accept that, what a charity organization is telling you as the truth. And yes, it's especially these days, it's quite easy to go and do a little Googling, or however it is you get your information, do your research, and discover that the things you're being told are either not true or not being addressed, or not being accurately represented. So so that for me is the story, is where it trips into complicity.
Ben, I'd like to say something about that as well. I come at it from a more academic perspective as well as a personal one. I'm an American Jew, actually living in Israel. I acquired Israeli citizenship, which mainly means I pay Israel value-added tax, and that's about it. I have tried as an American Jew to make American Jews especially more aware of what's happened, but at the same time, not seeing Israel as a solely guilty entity. And that's an intermediate position of sorts, in that I think what you say in the film is true and should be known. And I think it's very much getting known. And however, there's also a country of Israel, and 6 or 7 million Israeli Jews, most of whom were born there. So I don't think it's a simple answer to make it known. It's also a policy question. How do you get justice for Palestinians who are still the ones suffering the most from the Nakba, but also retain Israel? I'm a proponent of confederation. I'd be the first one to acknowledge we're a very long way from any justice for Palestinians.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something there that is really key to, why I wanted to make the film, which is, or at least why, having discovered what I did in setting out to make the film, I wanted to share it, which is, until these stories are told, until the Palestinian narrative is known, I don't know how we get to the next part of restorative justice and a Palestinian state, whatever form that's going to take, because the overwhelming view of Palestinians is still the one that's been with us since the PLO was blowing up planes and murdering Israeli athletes. Now, if you look at polling in the US, you can see that there is a interesting thing happening generationally, that there are certainly more younger American Jews who are starting to understand the other story, and how that's affecting their attitudes and support. But still a long way to go. But at least getting this, again, I'll quote something that's not in the film, but Eitan Bronstein from Zechrot said, it's all about stories here. And I think he's right. And for so long, the Palestinian story was not told. And I'm just one small part of it. And after many, coming to the game a bit late with my film, but many people have been trying to tell the story and telling it quite well and powerfully. Yet it's still hard to get, break through, which is why I'm so glad that, for example, it's part of this conference. I wish it were also true of other, like Palestinians know the story. They, and the ones I have spoken to, are very appreciative of the film. Jewish organizations, by and large, even the most quote unquote liberal-minded ones, are kind of doing what the woman on the Shrut did, which is, shh, don't talk about that. So, because as we sit here today, the film has been invited to more Palestinian film festivals than Jewish ones, interestingly. Make of that what you will.
Very interesting point. And I see that we had a question come into the chat. I don't know, Joyce, if you want to unmute and ask it, or if you'd like me to ask it. And then I also see that Ilana and Jack Miller have their hand raised, and we'll come to you after. Joyce.
Okay, I'm unmuted. And Jason, first of all, congratulations on the film. I saw it, and then shortly thereafter, I saw Blue Box, and I was stunned by the parallels and the fact that the second film was like the underpinning of everything you said on a personal basis, and being Canadian and being Jewish and giving gifts of trees. Your film resonated so incredibly powerfully with me. And then when I saw Blue Box, I thought, like, is this a team effort? Because the groundwork and the research, which just emphasizes everything that you had done in a more personal journey, was so powerful. And I wondered what your relationship with that film is, and the filmmaker and her engagement with this issue, and have you discussed this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, well, Blue Box, I was aware of, I became aware of around the same time that I was starting to seek financing for my film. I went to the Hot Docs International Film Festival here in Toronto, and this is probably going back 8 years or so, as I was just starting to look for money to make the film. And I pitched it to a commissioning editor from an Israeli documentary channel, who said two things. One, Israelis aren't going to be interested in a film by a Canadian Jew about what's going on over here. And two, someone else is making a film about the JNF, and she's the granddaughter of the guy who started it all. So, bye. So, he wasn't that blunt, but he was pretty blunt. So I said, okay, great. And then the film Blue Box has kind of been shadowing me ever since. And I say that with the greatest respect, because it's a fantastic film. I mean, she did an amazing job. And they are, I think of the two films as kind of two parts of a whole, if you will. They both happened to debut at Hot Docs last year. I have since had the pleasure of actually interviewing her for the Toronto Jewish Film Festival. Both of our films were shown at the Toronto Jewish Film Festival. And it's really fascinating. And actually, I'll just share something with you briefly about her. And she won't mind me sharing this, because we recorded that interview, obviously, for the festival. But you'll recall in Blue Box, there's one of the gentlemen that she interviews is very upset with her and says, I'm stopping this interview, right? And he doesn't storm off, but more or less, and he doesn't want to take part in the film anymore. Well, I asked her about that. I said, who was that guy? She said, that was my dad. He wasn't identified as such in the film, right? And I said, oh, what happened after that? She said, well, he's now the greatest advocate for the film, because what happened? He saw it. And he saw what she was trying to do. And now she can't get him to shut up about the movie. And he's, so, and I tell you that because I've had, like, that to me is the response that I think a filmmaker wants, is to put before someone ideas and facts and truths that they are not familiar with, comfortable with, wanting to get familiar or comfortable with, and then having a change of mind and indeed a change of heart. And I have had similar responses to the film from people who came at it from a completely ignorant, and I don't use the word pejoratively, but place regarding the history of the JNF, and the wider history, there from 48 and even from before 48, and who have said to me, I never realized there was another side to the story.
Well, I have to say that, as I said, I saw your film first, and I responded on a very personal level. And then I saw that film, which was as if it was, digging and approving everything that you had said, and your images of the Arab villages and hers, etc. And the fact, I guess she says in the film that there were many members of her family who just rejected the thing out of hand, that didn't realize that it was her father as well. But thank you for that, and thank you for the film. It's terrific and powerful, and I recommend it to everyone. So I'm very grateful to you.
Much appreciated. Thank you very much. Oh, I think you're on mute.
You're muted. You're muted now, Ben.
Ben, yeah, can't hear you.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Joyce. And for those of you who haven't seen Blue Box, I recommend it very much. And so now I'll ask Ilana and Jack to unmute themselves and ask their question.
Unmuted. It is. Okay. Hi, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you so much for the film. It was amazing, Jason. And Paul, I don't know if you remember, I think we know you from Shalom Akshab a long time ago. And I just want to, we're sitting in Jerusalem right now. The last week and a half of a 3-month stay. We've been in Israel many times, and I did make Aliyah in 1965 for 7 years. So it's another part of the story. From a personal note, your story, and we did see Blue Box last year, and then yours, the juxtaposition of the two of them together, that was the kind of the Israeli side, but yours made it so personal from it, this is us. If you saw the movie, this is, this story. This is our American story in a couple, in the connection. But right now, Jack and I are on a journey of a very, in the moment situation, because we have 4 children. One passed away in December. And we've been on the peace kick for many years in many different venues on the American scene and trying to help the Israeli side. But within about a week of her passing away, we received numerous trees planted in her memory.
Through JNF.
Through JNF. And I was really upset because I know all about this. We read about it in True Isle, and I think years ago there was articles digging about it by True Isle, and it was the foreword. We fought about it in our synagogue, and they're still using JNF locally, even though the rabbi says, they know about it, and we serve in the Arts Committee in a Reform Synagogue in Parkland, Florida. But yet, the good outweighs the bad. They have a big representation in JNF in Florida, and they feed they have presentations and speakers, so it's easy to allow them to come into the synagogue and speak about JNF and all the good work, okay, and just forget about that. But back to our current situation. So I called JNF, and I, in the United States, and I said, look, I don't want my trees that were in my daughter's name and, within past the green line. Okay. And this was the answer. They said they have no clue where it goes. They send the money over to KKL. KKL gives it to the land authority, I think, agency, and that's it. There's no way to do that. And and then we, a month later, we had a celebration of life for our daughter in the synagogue, and more trees came in. And so I wrestle with what to do about that, how much fighting I want to do in the synagogue on the communal level. We got a lot of hostility and kickback from it when we tried a couple of years ago, bringing up the issues. And our personal level, I was going to go call, Haaretz to make a thing, about it. But I guess restorative justice on a personal level, we've been going to a synagogue here, Kol Neshama, it's Reform Synagogue, and they're starting a connection to a village in East Jerusalem called Wallajay, which is not far from them in near Baca. And we're going down to next week planting 3 olive trees in that village to honor our daughter's memory, but as a small thing of restorative justice. So my question would be on that long thing is, what do you think of that? It's not the big picture. It seems like it's impossible to fix it. You couldn't get the JF. I can't get any answers. And you're a lot more powerful than I am. So what about the little...
No, I wouldn't use the P word at all with me.
Okay. So what do you think of on the people that know a small step in restorative justice by giving back at least 3 trees that are being, and then we're going to go help with this, other activities. Wow. Which is like, that's my story, my current story, still battling it.
And by the way, we were contemplating going to KKL with signs saying, "Where are my trees going to go?" We thought you might sue us for plagiarism.
No, but if you do that, please make sure you take photos. That's amazing. That I think is kind of part and parcel with the planting of the olive trees. Thank you for sharing that. And may I say how sorry I am to hear about the passing of your daughter. I think it's a beautiful thing that you have done. You found a way to honor her and to deny the JNF their cynical attempt to to take over her story. I mean, or to implicate her in what they're doing. I think it is amazing, and I don't think any act can be too small. It doesn't sound small to me. I mean, it's quite powerful, especially in the context that you spoke about when you get so much pushback in your community. And I'm sure it's appreciated on the Palestinian side, equally importantly. So, when I was shooting the film, the scenes in Israel, a good friend of mine who's also a playwright said to me, "You should, maybe one thing to think about." And I, still was contemplating the overall story of the structure of the film and so on. He said, "Maybe what you're doing is committing an act of tikkun olam." And I hadn't thought of it in those terms until he said it, and it made so much sense. That is what I was doing in my own way, and I think that's what you're doing in your way.
The other thing, and then I'll end, is that I'm going to ask a rabbi that yes, they have the people call the synagogue and actually can plant through the synagogue to JNF. There's a connection to have another possibility. If you want to honor or have it, let's have a donation to plant in Wallajay or wherever, so that or somewhere to help the Palestinians as a counterpart, as an option.
Amazing.
Paula wanted to add a few words, I believe.
Yeah, I certainly also share. I'm sorry about your loss. I think your instinct of rebelling against what was done and your action is very admirable. Marcia put in the chat that many organizations do have drives to plant olive trees in Palestine. So I think that sort of response, also as partners, one of the things that we do, we happen to be an organization that gets a certain amount of seats in the World Zionist Organization, which controls in certain ways the JNF. So we are almost literally in the belly of the beast, something I personally rebel against, but participate in, because that's a way that we can try, we and some other progressive organizations, try to control the JNF and have the influence on it. There are many ways, inside, outside, whatever, but I think the good part is individual actions like yours, and also actions by organizations to try to prevent JNF from continuing what it's doing.
Yeah, and just one very small note. There is another film on the JNF and on the issue of the forests covering up villages. It's I believe it's from South Africa. It was out maybe within the last 10 years also. And it's called The Village Under the Forest. I'm pretty sure you can find it on YouTube. The Village Under the Forest. And in that film, spoiler alert, the people who go to Israel from South Africa to find their trees and locate the village where their trees, the former village that their trees now stand over, give their tree certificates to the villagers to do with as they will. I think they ultimately burn them or something like that, or I think the holders of the certificates burn them. It's very, not doing justice to it, but it's very powerful and very much in line with the sort of thing you're talking about.
Thank you for the question, Ilana and Jack, and I echo my sentiments of condolences for your daughter. And I want to start wrapping up. And I want to first, before I have my closing statements, I want to offer to Jason and then Paul, if you have anything that you would like to say in closing before we say goodbye.
I want to thank everyone here, partners for making the film available, and for the work that you do, and for those who've taken time to join us today and share your stories and your questions. I'm really appreciative. A final statement from me is the film itself. I just wanted to put out there the story about someone who grew up with a certain set of beliefs and what he thought were facts, and went on a journey and discovered that what he'd been told were basically lies, and put it out there for people to do, make of that what they will. And I'm very, gratified with the response so far. So thank you.
And I'd like to thank you, Jason, for making the film. I actually did something I don't often do. I watched the film a second time because I'm talking about it, and was surprised how well it wore the second time as well. I'd recommend it to everyone. My final thought is just that all of us on this call, and of course, literally millions of other Jews, feel a connection to Israel of some sort. And it's important to make that connection comport with our own values, which is often hard to do. One thing that I hope people don't do is just say, the hell with Israel. Israel is a fact, and it's something that I, as a Jew, feel a strong connection to, and I very much appreciate actions like Alana's and Jack's, and especially Jason's, in making a truer version of the clashing narratives available to us in a film. So thank you, and thanks to Ben for moderating it, and Dinesh for setting it up.
Yeah, well, it's my pleasure to chat with both of you. And so in closing, I want to again thank you both for your time and for such an engaging conversation. And I'd also like to thank Dinesh, our executive director at Partners, and to my fellow symposium committee members, Marsha G. Yerman, Karen Shapiro, Lenny Grob, Ayala Ahmet, and William Hockhausen for creating the digital symposium and this event today. A very special thank you to the patron circle sponsor, the Shapiro Family Foundation, and our friendship circle sponsors, David Abraham, Ayala Ahmet, Evelyn Gelman, Mark Gold, Claude Goldenberg, and William Hockhausen. Oh, and Andrea London, as well as 2 anonymous contributors for your financial support and belief in Partners in our digital symposium. And last but not least, I want to thank all of you for being here today. And I encourage all of you who have not signed up for the full symposium, which starts again on this Sunday, October 23rd, to do so. I hope to see you all there. And thank you again for such a wonderful conversation.
Can I just one quick one here, because I see there's, and thanks for the comments on the chat, which I'm just catching up with, but someone has asked me how to make the film shown in a theater in the city. So my US distributor is called Level 33, Level, number 33. They would be the folks to contact if you, and I could give you a direct contact email with them if maybe you want to put it through Partners to send out to me, and then I'll get the email back to you. That's probably the best way, because I don't know if their direct contact info would be on their website, but I can certainly get you to the people to talk to if you have a theater in your hometown that you want to convince to show the film.
Great.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Let me copy that, Connie, and then I'll write to you directly. If I can do that. Can I copy from chat? Anyway, sorry, don't mean to hold everybody up.
No
I'll
worries.
figure it out. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Jason, we can get it to you and
Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's best. Thanks. Bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
And thanks to Ben.